Now we welcome in, and thank you for waiting, Marion Willis from St. Boniface Street Links. How are you, Marion?
I'm well, thank you. We're swamped, but we're well.
Well, you know what? Let's start there. How swamped are you, and what have you been seeing the past 6 months, past year, maybe compared to 5 years ago?
Well, I could even go back further to the beginning of where all of this starts. I think there's some value to being old enough to be one of the living historians of sort of seeing the social deficit as it's developed over the last pretty much 30 years. But I will say that our teams are kept pretty busy. We are finding that linking people out there to services, to housing, wrapping services around them, developing really good plans and building in the mental health services when we can't access them elsewhere is actually producing some very good outcomes for us. Busy. We're seeing a real migration of people from the west side of the river, all kind of moving over into St. Boniface now. And it is because our approach is really quite different. So I think we're really kind of on to something in terms of, working to meet the needs of people in meaningful ways. But I have to tell you, we're a small team, and it's quite a task at this point to try to keep a hold of it all.
Yeah, I imagine it's such a daunting task too, Marion. That clip I played at the start of our segment with Scott Newman, do you agree with that on fixing societal problems and how homelessness, poverty, addiction does lead to crime, and maybe why we're seeing a higher crime rate?
Well, absolutely. You know, for a few years, back when Chief Uwaski was the chief of police, there was a really, really heavy focus on crime prevention through social development. And crime prevention through social development continues to be the evidence-based best practice to address social issues. And that means to get to the root cause of all that plagues, in this instance, this city and this province. And as a first step in all of this, and this is where we're really stuck, and that's why I say this is built over about 28 years exactly. As a first step, governments have got to break free of the silos, that have been created that have all government departments operate in isolation of each other, like justice, including youth and adult probations, child and family services, education, employment training, housing, health, mental health and addictions, income supports. All those government departments at the highest level of government, at a ministerial level, have got to understand the interrelatedness of the challenges that we face and the interdependence of all those government departments to engage in cross-department planning. And what you end up with then is a multi-systemic strategy that can be reflected in a multi-systemic budget. Community organizations like the NGOs, like ours, for example, and all the others, the ones out there, there has to be some way of you can't fund the whole NGO sector. It's becoming an absolute industry. But, NGOs that are producing very specific outcomes need to be core funded to hire the real capacity, the professionals to support their lived experience teams. And that would add additional capacity to where law enforcement sort of needs it at a community level. Multi-systemic across government departments creates multidisciplinary at the service delivery level. And it is only when these understandings are embraced that we will see our city and province move from a position of constant reaction to one of prevention. And it's exactly there that the seeds of change must be sown. As it currently stands, we have a very scattered and fragmented landscape of social services. And if you think about hanging on to a cluster of helium balloons and just letting them go, those balloons just head up into space somewhere. And each one of those balloons represents a service to people. But there isn't that one string that kind of holds them all together. So there's very little access point for people. There's absolutely no coordination. Sal Burrows has got it right. He says that this city needs city and this province needs a very comprehensive strategy, and we just can't seem to get there. As much as government, it's holding engage sessions, and they really are working hard to engage Manitobans. The piece they're missing is they need to engage across the top of their own departments, and then collectively have justice and mental health and addictions and all those departments I mentioned, have them actually working together, in a more unified way to engage Manitobans. We're lost without that.
So this is fascinating to me because we've had Mayor Bowman on in the past week who talks about that, the need for programs and mental health. We're hearing you say it. Chief Danny Smythe said that this isn't a new problem. This is kind of normal. There's only been a 5% overall increase. So if everybody's sort of in on this infrastructure and saying, you said it's at the top, then how do we do that? Then what in your mind gets that done? If these so many departments of government are trying to do this, what is the obstacle at the top to get it done?
Well, I'm not so sure. I guess, it depends on the philosophy of the governing party of the day. The NDP are a much more socialist government, it was actually the NDP government that created the nonprofit sector as a service delivery arm of government. You have a PC government right now that has an entirely different approach and sort of believes in trickle-down economics. Well, that doesn't work. It hasn't worked for a few decades. We have we face many challenges and very different kinds of challenges than we ever have. And certainly the corporate world and philanthropy can't be expected to fund them. So I don't know. I think that political parties, for example, need to rethink a little bit their own agendas and their own philosophies, and it's kind of like we constantly move forward with very many new challenges, but we're stuck with some really old ideologies in terms of how we address things. Right now, what I've seen since we launched St. Boniface Street Links is, it's not that there isn't enough money out there. There's money, but it is actually it's how money is allocated. And it's like there's special interest groups and organizations with their own agendas. And so you do end up with, pockets of money into mental health and, changes in child welfare reform and, pockets of money into, just projects with, from justice and so on. But nothing is linked together to a plan. And so if you don't have a plan, then there's nothing that you can coordinate. And there isn't even really any way to measure success. Sorry.
No. Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. Go ahead.
Well, I just feel sorry for Winnipeg Police Service and also for Winnipeg Fire Paramedic Services, because I think they're expected, and unrealistically so, to be those that can solve all these challenges, and they can't. I see them, bending over backwards, sometimes being social workers. I was listening to something on the police yesterday talking about their enhanced first aid. They're almost, in some instances, acting like paramedics. They're trying to do the best they can, but it's like they don't have the tools. It's like building a house. You have, but you don't have the material and tools to build the house.
I share your thoughts on this. I share your thoughts on this because once we get past the who's pointing a finger at who, and I think that's gone on a little bit too much over the past 2 weeks. Once we get past that, it seems like everybody wants to do this. I can't figure out why it's not getting done. And in my mind, but the question I want to leave you with, Marion, is if you were to spend this money now, if you were you said there's money there, which is great news, but it's just not being allocated properly. If they were to spend it and allocate it properly, do you believe it would help offset some of the expense that we are seeing now with crime and what that costs us when it goes up, and lack of, help for those people, or I'll even go as far as sort of recovery and everything else? Like if we could figure out this allocation right now, wouldn't that offset a lot of the expense going forward around crime that we're seeing?
Not if you don't have a plan.
Okay.
The city and the province needs a well-developed strategic plan that encompasses issues around justice and poverty and, housing and addiction and mental health and all of these things. And that strategic plan needs to recognize that all of these issues are all kind of interrelated. And then that plan, has to be one that, really does some asset mapping and looks at, what organizations are out there that deliver particular services and which organizations actually can produce, have the capacity to produce those outcomes. And I think there actually needs to be an independent body. Don't ask Marion Willis and don't ask any other organization who might have their own agendas, because they're running organizations. We need an independent body that can actually spend some time working with government, the city, the provincial government, the NGO sector, and we need to do some asset mapping and look at what's out there, and then look at what the need is, and then how do we pull this all together, actually, to produce the kinds of outcomes that we need, because it's often not about there isn't enough money. It's just that the money is being spent to support this very scattered and fragmented, broken landscape of services with no coordination and no real point of access. So, I think that that's the place to start. There is no quick fix. It isn't just about, reassigning money. It's about we need a strategic plan. And I don't think that we should be relying on the usual sort of folks to develop that strategic plan. I think there needs to be an independent, objective body of professionals that work with the city to develop that plan.
Fascinating conversation, Marion. I'm really thankful for your time and your insight today, and I'm sure that this will spark even more conversation and hopefully maybe this plan that you are referring to. Thank you for doing this, Marion.
Yeah, you're so welcome.